I was at the time the American Consul General in Thessaloniki in Greece, and I first heard about the attack or the event because at the beginning it wasn't really obvious that it was an attack from my wife, who phoned me when I was in my office and said I should turn on the TV. A plane had hit one of the towers of the World Trade Center. So I turned on the TV and they were running it continuously. And then while I was watching, the second plane hit the second tower, and then they switched to Washington, and there was a huge cloud of smoke rising behind the Pentagon from a very, very telephoto lens. And then there was the talk of the missing aircraft over Pennsylvania. So the way I experienced it was a complete, utter lack of realization how far this was going to go. It was obvious that as soon as that second plane hit, this was no accident, this was no bad job of piloting or whatever. And quickly it became clear that this was something that was much larger, unclear how far it was going to go. So the first thing we did at the embassy, well, at the consulate and in coordination with the embassy, is send everyone home. We wanted to get people away from that place that we thought might be dangerous, our diplomatic facilities. And we set up a kind of a command center in my house in Neorisso, not very far from Thessaloniki, where we then tried to contact all the Americans in our consular district via the warden network that we had, the system of a contact tree that we have for American citizens. We reached, all of us working there, probably 10 people in my house. I think we reached just about every American in the next several hours. All of them obviously knew this had happened. They were welcoming our calls. They wanted to know that we were in touch with them and that we would pass along any other information that they needed to know about their security. Quickly, people began to contact us and let us know that they were sympathetic. In Greece, it was a little bit complicated because there was quite a bit of lingering sentiment over Kosovo in particular, which affected the perception of the United States at that time. There's a book that I kind of took the trouble to read not very much later called Kalana Pathon, a very unhappy story of how so many Greeks were prepared to say that the United States deserved to be struck. But most Greeks that I dealt with were not like that. They were very sympathetic, and we got excellent solidarity, sympathy from a lot of people, including people like firefighters, like people who are involved in emergency response. They were particularly welcome when they came to say how much they were sorry about what had happened and how strongly they felt for the firemen, for the first responders who died together with the people in the towers.
But then again, except from an ambassador, you're a U.S. citizen. It's common that you have friends, family. It's your base. It's your country. Mm-hmm. On a personal level, how hard was it for you to deal with what had happened?
Well, at first everyone was quite emotional, I would say. You would see the pictures and you would get emotional. There were events that we organized in order to bring people together, and it was just hard not to feel very sad. But over time, we began to put all of the events of that day in perspective. The country moved on. The individual people moved on. Some, of course, lost a lot more than others. Some people lost loved ones there. Some people lost dear friends, and others in that tragedy or that outrage. For them, of course, it's more difficult. For the country as a whole, I think it galvanized us to come together and refuse to be bullied or to change our way of life due to someone who wanted to strike us. Everyone dealt with it separately. I have to say I myself was sometimes kind of emotional when confronted with the just the thought of the people trapped in the towers as they were collapsing.
And the idea of being susceptible to any attack at any time, did that affect you on a personal level for your family, for your loved ones?
For me personally, having spent so many years working abroad, I guess I never had quite the sense of invulnerability that many Americans, I think, had up until September 11th, 2001. I never believed that we were somehow beyond the reach of terrorists. I had been in other places where terrorist incidents happened very, very shortly after I was there or before I got there.
Such as?
I was at the Vienna airport the day before the shooting of all of the Israeli passengers at the Vienna airport. I was somewhat involved in our response to the La Belle disco bombing that happened in Berlin. So I'd been around issues related to terrorism for quite a while, and I think I appreciated that there really is no place that is beyond the reach of a determined terrorist group. But for many Americans, including relatives of mine, close friends, I think they were stunned by the fact that a terrorist attack could reach the United States, and the magnitude of this attack, it was hugely made a huge impression on people. I mean, the symbolic, not just the lives that were lost, but the symbolism of these attacks was very, very unsettling. I've never seen anything so dramatic as the collapse of the two towers, frankly, in my diplomatic career.
And what about the impact on a political level? How did that influence the foreign policy of the US state?
Well, clearly we felt that we needed to take numerous effective measures to protect ourselves from terrorism after these attacks, and we did. We quickly identified Al-Qaeda as the organization that was responsible, and together with many other countries, we set out to eliminate that threat from Afghanistan, where they had put together a large set of training arrangements together with the Taliban regime. Generally speaking, I believe there was a natural response to make security the focus for some period of most of our foreign policy. And working in the Bush administration at that time, there was a distinct shift toward dealing with the terrorist threat a lot more energetically than would otherwise have been the case. We had a different foreign policy on September 10th, 2001 than we did on September 12th, 2001 because of the September 11th attacks.
Is it still a key factor when forming a foreign policy for the US government?
Certainly the effort to combat terrorism is still very, very important. We have a lot of partners that we work with on that. The countries of the European Union, including Cyprus, are very, very important to us in this regard. But it is, I think, over time, sort of assumed a more natural magnitude, a more proportionate stand or position in our overall foreign policy. We've had the experience of now about 12 years since the attacks. We have developed strong partnerships. We have focused on law enforcement, on information gathering, on all sorts of other policies that have helped to protect us. And I feel as though now we have struggle against terrorism that we do together with our partners. That is, I think, just a natural part of our foreign policy. It's something that's quite important, but it doesn't dominate our agenda.
Is there a special message that you want to send out on these 12 years since the 9/11?
I think my message would be, let's all band together to continue this effort. It's not a war. It is, however, a important element of our policy that requires close cooperation, a lot of information sharing, a lot of mutual support, so that we can deal with international terrorism in a way that protects all of our people. After all, we all have a common interest in protecting our countries, our populations, our territories, and on this basis we've found Cyprus and other partners to be very willing to cooperate with us, and we very much value that.